So welcome to the SMARTcurriculum Academy and Nomadic School of Business joint venture, a partnership of people concerned with growing skills across the education and wider sector. This morning we've got quite a distinguished panel of speakers that we're going to draw from. I'd just like to welcome and introduce John Rolfe, from Head of Arts at the St Clair's Academy in Oxford. Emmanuel Mankuro, you've seen come in from a Maasai elder in a village in Kenya, not far from Nairobi. We've got Julian Stilton, leadership expert, ex-commander in the Royal Air Force. Krishna Thapa, I'd see you. Welcome, Krishna. Thank you for joining us. Gurkha, one of the first Gurkhas invited to become an SAS member here in UK and London at the moment. Roddy, I haven't seen yet, but I'm sure he'll be joining us in a moment. Runs and founder of Ideas for Leaders, has written widely on the subject of leadership. We'll be hearing from him in a while. And Graham Malcolm, deputy head in the NAS school in Dubai, and we've got some pupils who are going to speak to us a little later on. And so welcome to you. So welcome to everyone for this morning. We will kick off in a moment with Anthony just opening the idea of this leadership. Just if you use the participant window and put your hand up if you would like to say something. If you've got questions that you've got want to ask as we go through, can you drop them in the chat? Nikki will copy them over for me, and I've got a sheet. Nikki, my assistant, will copy them. Thank you, Nikki. So if you've got questions that you'd like to ask as we go through, please just drop them in the chat. We'll make sure that they're covered a little later. But Anthony, I think at that point, let's go dive straight in. So over to you.
Very good. Well, I would obviously like to welcome everybody, many friends and new friends, and this is definitely a partnership of working together. And a lot of people who've known me, who've known for decades. I passionately
Hello, Sophia.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Is that okay?
Yes, you're fine, yes.
Brilliant. And really what we're looking at is, I believe, a fresh, new and exciting approach to developing leaders. And that is whether we're climbing Mount Fuji or whether we're elsewhere in the world. One second. What is it that we need in order to do that? And I think it is we're asking the question, what does it mean to be the best? What is it about being the best in the world to help people thrive today? And this is from Charles Lovibond, who is with us today, who is the business manager at the Abbey School. But how do we provide an environment for the leaders of tomorrow to identify and how they define themselves? And I believe this has always been with us. The question is now, how do we do it more? How do we really bring this to life? And what I think we have to do is to give people a sense of hope, a sense of their own clarity, that purpose and that agility of what they can achieve in their own lives. And I believe this has always been with us. This is ancient wisdom that to some extent we've lost. And I think we now think if someone sees something, they understand it. But what we've been working on, and I've been working on for 40 years, and as has Chris, is how do we start to look at things differently? And just as Emmanuel looks over his hill near Nairobi, is really to start asking, where are we now? Why are we going there? And where is it that in our own lives we want to be? And what I've discovered is whether you're a senior executive in an organization or you're a 15-year-old thinking about their baccalaureate, everybody has a map. They have hopes. And once they can start to talk about the map, the journey, their priorities, they can start to connect context in their conversations. They can start to understand the journey that they're on. And I think today, as we find ourselves robbed of security, stability, status, and we realize we have to rely on ourselves. And at the core of that, which Emmanuel will be talking about, is trust. How do we trust ourselves? How do we trust others? And what does that really mean? And this is how we've developed the trust wheel. So students and adults and everybody else can start to think about, where are they on that wheel? What is their own trust wheel? And ultimately, what is that journey that they're going to go on? So really what we're talking about today is how we can use the territory mapping and the nomadic wheel. But again, as I was saying, we are robbed of the normal stability. What I believe we need is our own philosophy. We cannot complain about what we don't have. We cannot complain about the weather, COVID, or anything else. What is it we can take authority for? If I can just give you some brief background of how these ideas have evolved. There I was, a small boy growing up in Africa, 8th generation expatriate. At the age of 22, I took a one-way ticket on the Trans-Siberian Express to Japan in search of adventure back in 1973. And in 1980, I went on a camel safari. And this was in northern Kenya. And each evening, the Maasai or Samburu tribespeople would come in. And what I saw is they had absolute presence. They had total substance without arrogance. And what I realized, my entire education was, how could I be massively arrogant with minimum substance? And I started to wonder, maybe this is something that we'd all lost in the West. We thought arrogance was really in replacement of substance. So I met the Papua New Guinea ambassador to Tokyo, a fellow called Joseph Nombre, and he said, would I like to go to his village? I said, I'd love to go to his village. So when I got there, I started to see people with feathers and spears. And I said, so why do you have so many feathers? To which he replied, well, a big man has many feathers. A bigger man can hand out his feathers. And I started to see that leadership is the ability to include. And I asked about the spear. And they said, well, the spear, you have to earn it. You cannot buy it. You cannot sell it. You have to give it away. And I thought back to all of those people in Tokyo I knew who had their BMWs and they had director on their name card. And they thought that entitled them to respect. And I think more and more today, we realize we are not in the land of entitlement. We are in the land of how do we contribute. When I got back to Tokyo, I asked the ambassador, what is the most important thing in his life? And he said it was his territory. He knew what to protect. He knew his duty. He knew his aims and ambitions because he had the identity of knowing where he came from. And that's what we've discovered in all of us. We have maps. We can walk across areas, but we have to have adventures. We have to realize that we have to develop a sense of that adventure in us. When I was invited to climb a 7,000-meter mountain in Western China, I realized I needed new skills. And that is what I think is challenging all of us today, is what are the skills we need to adapt, to adjust, and to thrive in this current environment. And I think what it is the clarity, the ability to take ourselves on an adventure and realize it is our journey. It is not someone else's fault that we can complain about. It is being invited into people's communities. It is having dreams and ambitions. And what I saw, having been on these journeys in China and elsewhere, that actually you succeed, not on your own, not on your own abilities. You succeed in creating a team. And that's why I opened the very, very first outdoor team building center in Japan with a simple ambition to give people a philosophy of I will not complain. And that was about trusting themselves, trusting their identity, and bringing out the willpower we all have. But what I discovered was even if you give people a great experience, executives, they kept saying to me, Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Where am I recognized? And I thought back to all of my time in Papua New Guinea and elsewhere. And I started to realize that just giving people trust and willpower is not enough. What I believe we have to do is to give people trust, but we have to give them purpose. And with that purpose, we need clarity of why we're doing what we're doing. And this goes back to the maps that I saw in Papua New Guinea. When I asked them in Papua New Guinea to draw their territory, they could all draw their village, their hunting area, their farming area, their fishing area. They knew their identity. But what I have now discovered, inside every organization, inside every person, there is that ability to talk about their village, the hunting area, the unknown. And that is Thomson Reuters, one of the largest companies. But what I found is once you have a map, once people can articulate where they are, what are they trying to do, you start to have context to conversations. You start to have people removing business jargon or school jargon. What is the season we're in? Are we moving from winter to summer? And once we can start to talk about our seasons, our hopes and our dreams and what we're trying to do, it's possible to engage. But also today, what I think is most interesting is you might have had a vision of where we wanted to go, but everything has changed. And what we need, whether we're an adult, a child, or anybody, is an idea of hope of where we are. And that's why bringing in the Maasai and bringing in people from Mongolia, for thousands and thousands of years, they have been able to adapt and adjust and create a leadership methodology that is inclusive. It is ability to welcome people onto their land and understand the problems that they are solving within their community because they have that clarity. And that's why with the Maasai, I sat down with Emmanuel, who is with us. And I said, so what is it that's really important in your life? He said, well, you have to know things. You have to do things. You have to have a community of support. And as a leader, you have to be able to give people hope. So yes, you need the hard knowledge. You need to know your territory. You've got to have the visible leadership. What are you going to do? How are you going to look after your cattle? And then you need a community. How are you going to build a community today based on values and integrity? And then yourself. What is those invisible leadership skills? Giving people hope, humility, humanity. And that Southern Hemisphere is what really is focused on education in an indigenous community, which Emmanuel can talk about. So what we're doing is we're looking at the wheel. We're linking that wheel, whether it is to the IB or whether it is to the moral education in the Middle East. We're looking at how can we bring relevance that's been with us for thousands of years. Not to dictate what is right, but to ask for debate, to ask for conversations. What are people's hopes? What are their expectations? And what is that journey that they're actually on? So I hope that gives you a little tiny bit of the background of where these ideas have come from. But I think now if I can hand it over to Chris to really talk about how he thinks things have changed and why it's so exciting what we're talking about. Chris, over to you.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Can you put the territory map up? Is that possible? And we can, is that possible now?
It should be up. So have I not been on, have people not seen what I've been showing?
No.
Well, that would have been helpful. Sorry about that. There we go.
I got involved in territory mapping because I went to a session with Anthony in a leadership growth a seminar, and I got involved in this idea. And you see on the screen the my response to it, which is really about the education. I've been 35 years in education and leadership and practitioner. And what you see in front of you was my response. On the upper side, the education world, whether that's state education or private education, there are people looking at how exerting their expectations of what's going on, and paths that are well worn, the things that we know. We talk to anybody. If I ask you the question, well, you know, what do you think education is? You'll all go back to your experience of it, whether that be professionally or personally. What I saw was there's a world outside, over the other side of the chasm, but that was pre-COVID lockdown, and in fact, you know, I've spent the last 10 years working with education leaders on what I would refer to as reimagining the possible. And some of that is quite difficult, often fraught with challenges. And I see the other side of the chasm as this, you know, the all-encompassing answer, the 42. What would it look like? But it's a blank space. And then pre-COVID, 3 weeks later, things changed. Things became very different. And when I went back with Anthony and redrew, what I drew was that some of the shackles have been taken off. Things are very open now. People were starting to walk across the chasm. And there are a number of things that are available. There are some resources that suddenly become really very positive. Google Classroom, Zoom, MS Teams, and so on. What teachers would exist without those resources now? Yet for the last 15 years, I've been talking about those being available for schools, and they've not been using them. And I describe a sandpit, the sandpit of discovery, that place where we can play and explore and do some things a bit differently and try some new things. And that's why I drew the fires of hope, that place where things can be. Now, interestingly, Almond, you just asked a question. I think hope's not everything. You have to take a step to make your dreams come true, not only by hoping that they will become true, take an action. Now you see my two people standing there. That's a brilliant statement. Thank you for that. And you know, from one of our young participants who's involved in education now, those people standing on the bridge need to take a step. They need to do something. And really that's what this is all about. Sorry if it's not polished, sorry if it's not a TV production, but this is about us taking a step about what's possible out there, what Anthony's just described. Anthony, are there any slides that you wanted to show? Because I was just saying we're not polished, no, but is there anything particular you wanted to cover? No?
Fine.
You're happy?
I explained it, so that's absolutely fine with me.
So what we're talking about is a mechanism, a method of getting young people and adults and leaders, and we're talking leadership not in the sense of the people that are just the bosses, but everyone taking that leadership step, being a leader in their own community, being a leader in their own expertise, in their own world, to do something that's different, to make something happen. So that's what this is about, rather than sitting back and saying, well, somebody else can do it, but actually giving people the confidence to be able to step forward. And as educators, surely that's the core of what we're about. Anthony, do we want to, let's introduce Emmanuel at this point. And Emmanuel's got involved in this process in developing the trust wheel and some of the territory mapping idea and the basis from it. So Emmanuel, Anthony, do you want to introduce him and his family?
Yes, I met Emmanuel a long time ago. In fact, he was in England on a cultural tour, and really listening to him talk about, as I said earlier, the wisdom that I think we've lost. Going on these trips that I went to in Kenya, I started to see people whose entire culture is around substance. And I think what I'd love to do now is to invite Emmanuel, and maybe with his family, to give us a short song about his community, I think as a welcome to everybody, if that is possible. Emmanuel, would you mind doing that, please?
You're on mute, Emmanuel, so just unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon from Kenya.
Hello.
Sopa everyone.
Yeah.
Sopa.
My name is Emmanuel Mankura, and I am in Kenya right now. I am in my home in Kisamis, Kenya. And with me, I have my family. I told them yesterday that today I have a meeting with Lemayan. This is Anthony Willoughby, who is very familiar. They are very familiar to him. They know him. And also with other leaders from different parts of the world. And I asked them, I requested them to come and also say hi to you and give you a Maasai song and sing to you a Maasai song, which is an invitation song which says Enenchepa Yano Along. But before that, I would like to welcome my youngest son. This is Christopher Olomayana. Christopher Owene. So this is
Hi, my name is Christopher, and I am 10 years old. And this is my goat who called Nekine, and I like it so much. And I wake up in the morning, I go to help my mother to milk the goat. And when I milk the goat, I go to school. When I am not going to school, I go to look after the goats. Thank you.
Sure, Ruben, please. Quickly. That's okay.
Hi, how are you? My name is Ruben Joseph. I'm 14 years old. I'm in class 6, Oleporo Primary School, and my responsibility at home is looking after the cows. Sometimes I go to look after the goats, and I love my work very much. Thank you.
Good. Sarah Jane, quickly, please.
Hi, my name is Jane Seria. I study in Olosios Girls Secondary School. I'm in Form 2, and I have got 17 years old. And my responsibility at home is I help my mother doing home chores like washing utensils, fetching firewood, fetching water, and also milking goats and cows. Yeah, and I like my work very much. Thank you.
Good. Steven?
Hello, everybody. My name is Steven Parsente Mankura, and I'm 19 years old. I'm in Form 2 in Najile Boys High School. My responsibility at home is looking after the goats and also cows. And sometimes I help my father in doing works at home. And sometimes also I help the community in various jobs. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, here is my wife, Juliana. Please, Karibu. She's Juliana Mankura. She's my wife. I told them yesterday that today we have a meeting. And he's doing, he normally does a good work in supporting the community. And she also gives me some help as we support our family and community. You have also heard what the children does. That's what they do at home. And also they are part of the community, and they are proud to be part of the community.
Surely.
Thank you. So without wasting any more time, please can you sing a song. So, Seria, please.
I have got a song which says, Enenchi Vayanolong, that means a happy day. Enenchi Vayanolong, Enenchi Vayage.
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 Enenchi Vayanolong, Enenchi Vayage. Enolong, Yage. Enolong, Yage. Enenchi Vayanolong, Enenchi Vayage. Enenchi Vayanolong, Enenchi Vayage. Enolong, Yage. Asholeng. Thank you very much. Asholeng.
Thank you.
Asholeng.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Now,
So we'll
yes, now we have.
Yeah.
Hello.
Emmanuel,
Hello,
shall
Emmanuel?
we're going to conclude you and thank you for that. That's great to
Yes.
hear, and it's really that was a thank you to your family, and it's really encouraging to hear what they're doing and taking responsibility for things in your community. Thank you for that. We're going to move to the panel. No, pleasure. Thank you. We're going to move to the panel and just draw in some. So this is a live experience, and things are already in place and have been used already. So we want to exemplify some of those. So firstly, John Rolfe from St Clair's in Oxford. You've already been in part of using this experience within your school, and you've had some time with your learners engaging with Emmanuel. Would you like to just spend 5 minutes describing a little of what happened for you?
Thank you very much, Chris. I hope you can all hear me. So good morning to you all from me and my colleagues at St Clair's in Oxford, where we aim to promote international education and understanding. Thank you to Emmanuel. We met Emmanuel before on the 17th of June, as you can see, and he sang for us on that occasion. I'm hoping my music colleague Roy might like to sing in return a little bit later, but I don't want to put him on the spot too much. So it's great to see all the chat going on around various important words in our discussion. I'd like to invite you on the chat to answer the question, in what way are our minds like parachutes? See if anyone gets there quickly. Well, the answer being, they work best when they're open. So that's right. Thank you, Giles. Yeah. So open-mindedness, along with hope, is one of the themes that we'll hear about today. We'll hear about the value of experience and wisdom, of risk-taking and principles. And on Wednesday, the 17th of June this year, we at St Clair's invited our pre-IB students, International Baccalaureate students, like us, working remotely from locations around the world, to be open-minded and with the help of Anthony Willoughby and Emmanuel Mankura to engage in a day of territory mapping and exploration of the trust wheel. And you can see some of the outcomes on the screen. I think Anthony can show some of those. So these are students who've drawn maps and are now presenting them back to the group. So in the morning, they were asked to draw where they see themselves in the world, what they value and wish to protect, what lies on their horizons, and to think concretely about how to cross the barriers in between. They were encouraged to think about what is meaningful to them, what they would like to achieve, and to find a way to make that happen. In the afternoon, they were asked to reflect on their core attributes and or values, but rather than just list them, they were asked to draw what is at the center of their wheel or flower, or whatever it was that they drew, around which the other attributes or values turn. So this was inspired by Anthony and Emmanuel's idea of the trust wheel. So how did it go? Well, first of all, my colleagues and I were hugely impressed by the maturity of our own students and their ability as communicators and their visions. We received enthusiastic feedback from the students themselves, from their personal tutors, and very importantly, from parents who are the ones who trust us with their precious offspring, who come aboard with us from different countries. So what next? In a moment, our Vice Principal for Pastoral Life at the college, Ellen, will just say a few words about her observations on the day. But I know that staff who participated are interested in following up with Emmanuel on issues that his community faces as they try to strike a balance between openness to change while respecting elders and valuing their traditions. Anthony and I have also discussed the possibility of linking with nomadic leaders in Mongolia. And my colleague Roy and I are eager to explore how we can open our classrooms through Zoom and other things that Chris mentioned to the wider world of art making and knowledge production. And of course, we hugely enjoyed Emmanuel and his family singing. So that's a brief introduction, a little glimpse of things for you on the screen there. I'd just like to invite Ellen to say a few words on her observations on the day.
Ellen, are you
Unmute myself, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I think we found it incredibly useful and student inspiring. And I think two things that really were obvious on the day, or that did strike me, was how engaged all students were, because they could draw, they could be creative, there was no template, there was no expectation. It was their journey, and it actually made them reflect. And some of them went back into the childhood. They started there in the childhood and look where they are now, where they are going. Some of them just reflected on where they are now and where they are going. But it was just different, I think, just different format that inspired them and engaged them. What I also observed that they were really happy to share what their journey, where they are on the journey. They don't normally do it on a daily basis, so this was their opportunity. What was also good that staff were also engaged in drawing the map and trust wheel, and we actually compared our journeys. You know, students shared their journey and staff shared, you know, their journey, and we could see those differences and we could find out more about each other. So it was really enriching for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anthony, did you want to say something?
No, just really, it was an absolutely inspiring day to feel the energy. Kids dotted all over the world, from Russia and everywhere else. And this is what we're looking at, really the next steps of bringing this in, whether it's talking to the eagle huntress, who I've got very good connections with, who can talk about what it's like to grow up in Mongolia and become a world star about bringing your values and your traditions. Krishna, who is with us, talking about what it's like to leave a village in Nepal and then be the SAS and to climb Everest. And then we have Christo Brand, who is watching today, who was Nelson Mandela's prison guard. And these are the sorts of ideas that we're looking at going forward to create excitement and to create real adventure in people's lives, to talk about their humility and their humanity. But this is where, Emmanuel, if you would like to talk a little bit about some of the areas, maybe Chris, you've got the things that you think would be most amazing. But it's been phenomenal being with Emmanuel, whether it's in Japan or whether it's anywhere else in his community, to understand about it. Chris, I think you've got the questions for Emmanuel.
Yeah, absolutely. Emmanuel, can we come to you next on the panel? I'm just going to unmute you. You should. Are you okay to unmute? Yeah. So you've been involved in
Yes.
the development of the trust wheel. Can you tell us a bit more about how this came about, and just give us a bit more detail about the trust wheel and how this relates to you in your community?
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. And I would like to say that I come from the Maasai community in Kenya. And we, as the Maasai people in Kenya, we have over 42 different language groups. And the Maasai people are one of the tribes who live in the southern parts of Kenya. And we are a famous tribe. For many years, we have famous tribe, partially because of our lifestyle, because of our pastoralist and nomadic, semi-nomadic lifestyle, and many others. And over the years, for over 10 years, about 15 years now, together with other community leaders, we have been supporting our community, or leading our community, because we have got changes that are always coming to the community. And therefore, these are changes coming into the territory, into our territory. And therefore, if there are territorial changes, we as community leaders have to know how to deal with that. And this means that we have to look at our territory, we have to look at the values that we have. And it happens that trust is one of the values, one of the most important values in our community. It is like, the backbone of the community, because without trust, without trusting each other in our community, then performance becomes very low. So therefore, I have had an opportunity to welcome and host many leaders from different parts of the world. I've also traveled to other parts of the world. And the main thing that I've been talking about is about our territory. I've been sharing with them about our territory and about our values. And one of the values, and it is very interesting, because it is as if we are talking one language with them. They do understand me, because they also talk about their own territories. They talk about their values. And my talk and what I talk about makes a lot of sense and a lot of relevance in their environments. And therefore, the trust wheel, which we created with Lemayan for over 10 years ago, tries to capture many other values and many other things that take place in our territory. And the trust wheel is a very, very important tool. It's a very, very important tool, not only in our community, but I found that it is also very important in other tribes all over the world. And so that's all about the trust. And
Emmanuel,
so
can you tell us a bit about, because you were talking about, when we were talking before, about education and how your students go away to be taught in school, and then how you see that difference between knowledge and wisdom. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, oh sure, Chris. Part of what we do in our community, because we deal with the elders, we deal with the women, we deal with the youth. And now, the type of education that we have, whereby the children go to school, like my children, you've heard from them, they go to primary school, they go to high school, they go to colleges. And it is very important, we as community elders and leaders, to make sure that our culture is still alive. It is our responsibility to make sure that our youths, our children, know their values, know that we as a community have got our system of education, which existed for many, many generations, before we received the, the Western type of education. And the Western type of education is also important because it helps the student to get the skills and know-how, the knowledge of knowing how to do things, and then bring it back to the community. Therefore, we normally tell our students, our young people, that while we send them to bring knowledge into the community, because education is very, very important, it is also important for them to know that we as a community have got wisdom. So there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing how to do things. And this means that you may not have wisdom. So it is very, very important to have wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is an accumulation, and is an accumulation of understanding. Having understanding, knowing how things work together and why things work together. And so therefore, we talk to our children when they come for the vacation, when they close schools. When they come for the vacation, we talk to them about our traditional ways of living, and in order for them not to lose our culture. And therefore, we also talk about the difference and what is changing. What is changing in our world as a Maasai people, our territory, what is changing in our territory, and how they can support us, how they can come back as a Maasai young people and help our community, because they are tomorrow's leaders. And we want them, we want to keep our culture. So it is now a time to define what to keep and what not to keep. And that what not to keep is a taboos. The things that are no longer relevant are no longer relevant in this generation, in this new territory where we are. So therefore, that is what we talk about with them. We talk about wisdom, we talk about our culture, our ways of dresses, our values, the value of respect. The value of courage is also very important, especially to the youths. It's very important to everybody, because as you work, as you confront your day-to-day life, you must use courage and wisdom, because without wisdom, courage without wisdom is not, it does not work very well. So it's not only a point of giving people hope. Hope is important, but also courage is important, and responsibility is also important as well. And courage without wisdom, is not encourageable.
Emmanuel,
so
thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, we are limited on time, but thank you. I mean, it's important to hear what you're saying about retaining culture and that yes. difference between knowledge and understanding, and the responsibility you take to get the children to understand that within your community is really really important. Thank you, Emmanuel. We are going to have to move on, and thank you for your input today.
Okay.
It's very really great to hear from you. Giles, can I come to you? Giles, in the United States, it has run the programs with students within your MBA programs, and I'll just tell us a bit about what you found and some of the things that you've said about this territory mapping and the trust wheel. Thank you, Giles.
Hey, good morning or afternoon or evening as appropriate. How are you, everybody? I'm delighted to be here, and it's really been a wonderful journey working with Anthony over the last few months. And I'm really excited about bringing these ideas into the MBA curriculum. I've taught at Shenandoah University for almost 30 years and taken a very experimental approach. And I think this is among the most interesting periods of my career, introducing these ideas. I think they have so much value and applicability to modern business education. So I'll just say a couple of words about that. First of all, going back to what Emmanuel said about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. In business schools, primarily, we're concerned with knowledge, and that is particular skills and knowledge of particular things and activities such as marketing, accounting, supply chain, finance, things of that nature. And I think what's missing is the big picture, the context, as Anthony had alluded to earlier, and the way it shifts. And I think that learning really only happens when people see the larger context of things. And so it's, you know, I've tried to seek out ways of helping students to put all the pieces together. And what we're seeing is, generally speaking, a lack of sort of general confusion and inability to articulate the basic questions of our existence, which could be our own personal careers or as organizations, which is, who are we, where are we going, and how are we going to get there? And I know that much of this has been addressed by tribes, for example, Emmanuel, Maasai and others, but also is included in our own history. If you go back to the ancient Greeks, Aristotle, for example, was looking at this, was differentiating between knowledge and wisdom, and basically said that, asked the question, what does it mean to be? And he said, to be something substantial, to be something of substantial, to be something of substance, is to be something that can be accurately defined and therefore discussed meaningfully. And I think one of the problems we have is just this lack of clarity on these basic questions. And so I'm seeing this territory mapping and these other tools as a way of achieving greater clarity. And I think in future, in the past, the leaders have always been the ones who have an understanding of what the big questions are. But in the future now, it's going to be something that's more of a collective enterprise. So what I've been doing with Anthony in the last few weeks is we've been bringing several components together into the course. The first component is that we have Anthony's materials, which are things like the trust wheel, the step-by-step steps in territory mapping, and various case studies. The second thing is tutorials. So we, thanks to Anthony's connections, we have brought in people who have worked for large corporations or successful entrepreneurs who have literally built multi-million pound or dollar businesses on the back of a clear map for their organization. And the third component is that we have brought in readings. So I bring in readings which complement the whole area of territory mapping. They may be things such as on mental mapping, for example. We bring those readings into the curriculum, and I find that they help to deepen the students' understanding and get them thinking more deeply about these concepts. At that point, then, we start working with live clients. And we're working with several clients this summer, one of which is Clark & Hopkins, which is a small company based in Virginia that makes artisanal sauces from all over the world. And what the students are doing is basically working with Brandon Clark, who's one of the founders, to develop his territory map for his business, which is a nascent business, rapidly growing business. But quite frankly, he's got so many opportunities. The question for him is, how do we prioritize, and how do we put them in some kind of meaningful order? So in this particular case, we have had this tremendous experience of working with Brandon directly and developing and discussing and interpreting his map. And then the students have been tasked with investigating certain aspects of his map. So for example, Brandon wants to know, is it really viable for us to sell on Amazon? How do we start an influencer campaign? Or how do we get into airlines and airports to sell our sources? And each of the students then takes one of those topics and is tasked with doing the research. And they come back and contribute that knowledge to help enrich the map and clarify and help Brandon to generate a new map, a new and better map. So the final part of the course is that the students will create their own maps, okay? And their own maps will be for a venture. So for example, one of my students wants to open a tennis academy in the United States. And earlier in the summer, we had the students develop their own fledgling kind of a maps. And this is an opportunity for them to go deeper and develop that map. And I think that's so exciting simply because generally speaking, in education, in business education, you know, you learn your concepts over here, but your own future is something separate and something you need to work out for yourself. Now we're really coming full circle and joining the dots and showing the students that your future is part of your education here at the school, and we need to make that a central pillar. And I think the students are excited that we're giving them that opportunity to express themselves and develop their own maps. Sorry, I'm speaking quickly because I was conscious of the time, and I hope some of that made sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Giles. No, it did. That's very good of you. Julian, can I call on you next? You're going to talk to us about leadership and how this can impact on that from your vast experience of leading people in various contexts. Julian, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and good day, everybody. I mean, vast experience of making lots of mistakes and trying to learn from them is where I'd probably start. I think the approach that we've tried to take has been practical. It has to be pragmatic. It also has to be empirical. I mean, there's no point in just living off books like the 7 Golden Habits of Successful Executives. Things are learnt in the field, and things are learnt the hard way, as I'm sure Emmanuel would probably agree. My leadership, where it's all come from, is you have to know yourself. You've got to know you've got to appreciate your own training. You've got to appreciate your own experience. For yourself, you're probably made up of a barcode, your first 7 years alive, what your parents instilled in you, your values, the very basic stuff, what your first maths master put into you, in my case, a phrase, brains, initiative, gumption, and guts, which he had written above the board, which I can remember more than the trigonometry he tried to teach me, but there we go. And all your training, the big E education that everybody all talk about, but more importantly, the small E education, the stuff around the sides, the things that you learn and you pick up as you go along, either through doing it a lot, through practicing it, or through having your ideas challenged at an early stage. I was very lucky to go to a school where maps were deliberately hung on the wall upside down to make you appreciate things. You were never allowed to argue yes if the answer was obviously yes. You had to learn how to answer no, things like that. So a bit obtuse, but very, very useful. And on top of that, experience and getting experience, finding out, exploring, being exposed to risk, learning how to take risks. The simplest way I can remember on my first squadron, this is a rather 1960s, 1970s fighter jet, my commanding officer said in about my second month there, here's the keys, take this away, go any way you like, don't break it, and don't get into too much trouble. I failed on the last bit, but essentially that really reinforced the things we've been talking about. You know, there was real trust there was clarity in the direction, and I'm not sure whether courage was more on his part or on my part, but there was courage in there as well, to actually trust somebody to go out with a multi-million-pound aircraft and come back later and not dead. Thereafter, I moved into teaching people how to fly aggressively in combat and how to fight and to do all things. But that is of no point unless you can actually pass on this experience, both in terms of what you've been doing professionally, almost in terms of your world views. I've worked at staff colleges and things like that and headed up departments and the rest of it, and really moved further and further into leadership. It brings me on to territory mapping, trust wheels, and the rest. It's a terribly important way in my book of being able to unlock you, the you within you. It encourages self-expression, it encourages self-analysis, which builds on self-awareness, can build on your self-confidence as well. And it forces you to look at the context, you know, where you are, where things fit, the position of things, the relative nature of things. And it also starts to push you forward and expose you things to other ways of leading, other forms of leading. You don't know how to do it, you can always start by copying the good bits in other people. But it starts you watching, listening, learning, pulling through ideas and looking for parallels, for patterns, maybe for echoes in your own experience. And the most important thing is that there are a lot of people around here, at least 45 up, etc. And we'll all have views on how to do it differently. My quest is to learn how to lead in different ways. I can be a heroic leader, I can be right up the front, clutching a knife between my teeth, or I can be back down the back nudging. But you've got to appreciate that it's a multifaceted approach, and it's very, very important to do it. And this territory mapping and the trust wheel that goes around it, Anthony and I discussed it over a couple of pints yesterday. There's an awful lot in there. It can be unpacked in different ways, and I think it's a good basis for a lot of development. Chris, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Julian, thank you for that. And it's really just to pick up on those things. I mean, learning is beyond the classroom. It's that sense of going into experience, because you didn't learn that aeroplane, how to fly that aeroplane simply by sitting in a classroom and knowing how to. You had to get out there and do it. So there's that work of moving from knowledge to understanding and delivery, which picks up on what Emmanuel was saying earlier. Thank you for that, Julian. That's really, really powerful stuff. Can we move on to Krishna? Krishna, you're going to tell us a little of your experience and just center on the clarity part. And certainly where you've climbed Everest, I'm sure being clear about your objectives have been really important to you. Krishna, are you there?
Yeah. Namaste, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the world. We met Anthony a few months back and one of the leaders events, and I was very fascinating, and that's why we started. So basically, I think one of the most interesting thing for me is there's the education for the young kids and suicide rate in the world is alarming. And obviously at the moment, 70% of the human lives are on the prescription. And the point is, I think I'm gonna leave it later, just a quick one from myself. I born in the mountain where the monk and in the jungle. And I grew up at the Hindu and Buddhism culture with the Buddhism, my kind of philosophy. And I joined the British Army almost 25 years ago. And now I still work and live in London now. So one of the most important thing what I found is try to understanding the way in the Himalayas and Buddhists we do, and then the understanding the West and the culture. I think the very fundamental what I found is whereas in the West it's a lot more people and societies are focused on the cooperative business and all the kind of the knowledge, which is database information, whereas I find in the kind of Nepal or the East is the wisdom. How can we find the truth and living the life, and also focus on us understanding ourselves, inner ability, and just kind of have understanding. I think that's the huge difference I find. And also I think the other thing is the important thing is when we talk about, especially I think we're going to focus on today about the clarity. So whatever we do, if we are confident or whatever we are mission, what we want to achieve, if we are not clear ourselves, and the whole thing is mess. So I think important thing what I find is the clarity, having understanding. If you can't, let's say if I want to go to the next place, if I can't see clearly, then it's basically the understanding of myself is not clear. So I have to look in myself, my eyes. How can I clear my eyes? And in order to understanding the, like clarity and achieve the aim is to basically what I mean is to try to look understanding ourselves. I think that is the very important thing I find. And also the some of the other stuff which I focus on, and the understanding is the body, mind, and our conscious action, not a compulsive action, which is determined. If we talk about the Everest, again, it's come down to understanding our own inability and action. If we can we be a conscious? Can we be a take a breath? Can we focus on ourselves, and then in order to focus other and to achieve the mission? I think that's what I find very, very different. And I think importantly, a sense of belonging, sense of truth is also, we only can find within us. Once we find ourselves, then all the rest of the world is reflection, what we can see. So what's that clarity is also understanding ourselves, our understanding, and like our body, mind, and conscious action, which can only be cleared when we clear ourselves.
Christian, thank you. So what you're saying there, so you're really talking about purpose leadership, having some mission to achieve. Have you got some final remarks before we move on? Just conscious of time.
No, and absolutely. I think that's that's at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Lovely. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. That's great of you to contribute, and thank you for being here. Roddy, can I move to you? You're focusing on leadership development, and it's that bit of what's missing from leadership development. We take that thought up.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm Roddy Miller. I'm editor of Developing Leaders magazine and a couple of online publishing platforms which focus on leadership development primarily, and work with business schools around the world. And I mean, there are lots of really interesting themes, threads that are coming through all around here, which tie in beautifully to territory mapping. I traveled with Anthony to Kenya almost exactly a year ago today, and met with Emmanuel there, and was privileged to meet his community. And the things that struck me about that experience was the intrinsic understanding within those organizations, within the community, that people have about supporting their community, and it was that ability that they were all imbued with from the very youngest age, and we saw it with the Emmanuel family just now, of responsibility and competence to get on and do things, and the trust that then comes down towards them to allow them to do that. And those are things that we see are really difficult to capture in large matrixed organizations. I think what territory mapping does is allows us to shift or to gain clarity and alignment around those things. And one of my great missions is really to try and make organizations more human. So get away from the sort of mechanized fashion of large organizations where everyone is distilled down into small cogs and units, and allow the pendulum to swing slightly back towards a more relational way, networked way of operation. And organizations are desperately trying to do this, but it's extremely difficult. One of the other themes that's come out today that I think is really interesting, and is not at all surprising given the background that most of us are from here, is this, that leadership and learning are essentially two sides of the same coin. They, if you can, we know that learning improves massively through experiential activities and practice, and leadership ought to be devolving that experience and practice down to people too, and that's what creates fulfillment and success in organizations. Julian mentioned moving away from heroic leaders. I have a little sort of riff on that, which is actually we need more heroic leaders, but not heroic in the sense of the champion great man standing at the front, but people who are big enough to stand back and let others get on and do the work, and that there's a sense of heroism in that, in being able to devolve power, or devolve responsibility, but in order to do that you need huge clarity, and again that's where the territory mapping really comes into its own. It shows up where there is misalignment, and it enables alignment. So in brief, I think territory mapping is a really useful way of enabling people to bring all these different layers together. I'm really pleased to see Trudy West has joined us today, because one of the really good, we published many really good articles in Developing Leaders, but Trudy's article from, in fact, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, I can't remember when it was, Trudy, was Trudy studied, and maybe she has a chance to come on in a moment and tell us a bit more about it, but studied the round the world yacht race, where people from lots of diverse backgrounds came and were held together in a really small confined space, i.e. an ocean-going yacht, and had to work together as a team. And out of that, correct me if I'm wrong, Trudy, but you came out with a model which was around all these things, which is around autonomy, alignment, and capability, I think it was. And that's what we see in lots of indigenous communities, just happening by osmosis, really. They happen without intent. Or they just emerge, that kind of alignment and autonomy of which autonomy is just essentially another word for trust, being, it's the other side of trust, I think, isn't it? And clearly that only happens with capabilities. It was really interesting to see, and I hadn't put the two together before, but to see the ideas behind that model coming out in what we see in indigenous communities too. So as I say, there are lots of threads that come together, and I think the territory mapping process is a really intuitive one that enables people to identify where the gaps are, where the misalignments are, and pull something together that works really powerfully.
Roddy, thank you for that. Trudy, did you want to say anything quickly? I mean, we're getting pressed for time, but just really quickly,
what was really interesting about the race was, even though it was a race, a given race with an end point, really clear metrics, only about a third were interested in winning the race. So if you take that as a really clear winning, and then you sort of spread that out to organisations where everybody has all sorts of different things that they're being measured on, how is it at all possible, without being more human, to really move everybody forwards towards something?
Wow, that's thank you for that. Yeah. We're just going to move on to Graham Malcolm, a deputy of the NAS school in Dubai, and the thing that strikes me in this is that with the spectrum of people that we have in the room, that we're talking about university graduates working with large organizations and small organizations, but also we're talking about working with young people starting their lives and setting their agendas out. And very much this is age agnostic. We're not talking, it's about a discipline of thinking, it's about a discipline of organizing and corralling yourself and what I'm about. We've heard a lot about purpose, and we've heard a lot about mission. Graham, could you tell us what went on in your school? And I think you've got some students that are going to share a little bit more too. So Graham, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Listen, so much collective wisdom just being shared in the virtual room today. It's stunning. And I hope that I'm going to trump that, actually, because I'm going to hand over to you. You mentioned there about this is all age agnostic, the kind of things that we've talked about. And I am going to hand over in a moment to Alamd and Ella, two of our students, who, correct me if I'm wrong, girls, you're both 12 years of age. Is that right? Yeah. So please do hear the student perspective this afternoon on the work that we've done in our school so far. But I will give you a little bit of a backstory to it first. And Chris, you alluded to leadership shouldn't be the privilege of the few, and that's very much our leadership philosophy at NAS Dubai. The acronym VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it was first, I believe, in the 1980s, but it's something that's now used by the US military. And we live in a VUCA world, there's no doubt about that. And I think as educators, we have a moral and professional responsibility to build resilience in young people. But personally, I feel that I haven't quite put my finger on yet on how we do this. And Giles, you spoke earlier about helping students put the pieces together, and I feel that that's that's where we are at as a school, and we are at as educators. And the nomadic trust wheel and the territory mapping really gave me certainly a sense of perspective with that. And I first met Anthony last year, I believe, when he was visiting our school as part of the work he's been doing with some of our international baccalaureate students for their theory of knowledge course. And I was introduced to the trust wheel, and it resonated with me, not just as an educator, but as a human being as well. And it was immediately obvious to me that here was a concept that was underpinned by values that I guess are both timeless and contemporary all at the same time. So Anthony and I began a dialogue about how we might map his work against other aspects of the curriculum. And that took us to a subject that is compulsory in all UAE schools, which is called moral education. And I felt we had a real good opportunity to breathe new life into this subject by embedding the trust wheel into the 4 different pillars that make up the moral education curriculum. We've since invited Anthony to deliver a hugely successful virtual assembly during our period of online learning, followed by an invite extended to all of our students to participate in the first ever international territory mapping workshop hosted by Anthony and Roddy, who you just heard from. And it was then that our students, including Alamd and Ella, joined a global audience to map their territory. And I think it's fair to say, Anthony, Roddy, that they somewhat stole the show that day. And they inspired adults from around the world with their powerful message of hope. So I'm delighted to say that we've got Alamd and Ella with us today. And it was when I first listened to them describing their territory maps that I truly begin to realize how we might tap into and nurture the universally understood and cherished values of trust, clarity, and inclusiveness. And I believe that if we do that, we are fulfilling our moral and professional responsibility as educators to give young people a sense of direction and purpose in an ever complex world. So I'm going to sit back now and empower the voice of 2 inspiring individuals. So Alamd, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. I'm Alham from NAS Dubai, and I'm in year 8, but going to year 9. So for my territory mapping, I drew a map for my future, which I can show you if possible. So it's like this, and then it's basically of right now, like staying at home and then going towards my GCSEs and working hard for getting good grades and going to university and getting a degree and becoming a doctor. So what I believe is you just have to work hard and have hope, but also take actions. Hope is not everything in life. To take a next step to make that hope come, to make your dreams come true, you have to take an action. So don't just sit hoping about your dreams coming true, but take an action. Last workshop we discussed about northern Pakistan, because I come from there, and we discussed that there are many people, talented people. So we can't just sit and hope that they will come out and the world will know their talents. We should take an action to tell the world that there are many talented people in northern Pakistan. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alamd. Ella, are you there?
Yes. So hi, my name is Ella Murat. I am 11 years old and I am at NAS Dubai. Good morning, good night, good evening, good afternoon around the world. So I am in year 7 going into year 8. And I think the first territorial mapping workshop was really inspiring because it kind of got me to think, what do I want for myself? What do I want to become? What should I do to help myself become that? And I drew a map, here I have it here. I drew a map of 2 lands, the land of despair and the land and my future. And there was the bridge of possibilities connecting both of them. And I was walking alongside a few of my hopes and dreams and some of my worries and problems. And then somehow the bridge broke because of COVID-19. And like a lot of businesses and like a lot of countries, it really made us think, how can we take from that time and ameliorate our actions? How can we think of what had happened, and if it happens again, what can we do better next time? So I was thinking of that, and then we all fell down, and my worries stayed on the land of despair, and all my hopes and dreams were falling down into the pit of emptiness, until I had a little bit of hope that I could continue, that I would still be able to learn in online school. And I just need a little bit of hope. And as Alam said, hope isn't everything. You need to take an action. So I was thinking I need to work hard to get where I want to be. So that answered my question. I wanted to be wherever I can get the most, wherever I can work hard and help myself, where I feel good and where I feel that I am working hard, that I am not laying back, and that I feel that I am giving it my all, and that I can do, and that I am in thinking of what I can do better if that problem happens again.
Brilliant. And you're looking forward to being an ambassador on this project in the school, aren't you, and bringing it to all?
Yeah, I am looking forward to when we bring this project into the school, when hopefully we get back in September. I was also hoping that we bring this project down to the primary and younger kids, because they have as much wisdom as average adults, because their minds haven't been tainted with experience, so they can learn whatever. They have clear minds. So if we show them the good example, if we show them what is best, they will have that in their minds for the rest of their lives. So I think not only we should keep this project around the world for secondary and adults, but also we should bring it down to younger kids, because we all have different ideas. Yes, Alam. So we can see what we can do better and ask everybody.
Ella, thank you for that. And we've got some primary leaders and colleagues with us. So your words are being heard around the world by a number of school leaders in various different contexts, but that's brilliant. Thank you. Graham, did you want to finish up, or are you okay?
Yeah, just to go back to your original question, actually, Chris, that you can see, I hope, that the direction that we're moving in this. We want to empower a group of individuals, Alam and Ella, just two of a group that Anthony and I have been working with, who, when we get back into school, hopefully, and back to some sense of normality, that we can take these ideas and extend them out to a more diverse and wider age group of students, because you can hear from just from listening to Ella and Alam how powerful that is, and how much it's resonated with. And I do apologize, Ella, I said you were 12, you're only 11. And at 11 years of age, Ella's taken that concept and made it her own. And she's clearly now an 11-year-old girl with a sense of purpose and direction, as is Alam, who's mapped out their territory and they know where they want to go. And that, believe me, is just so powerful. If we can give all young people a sense of purpose and direction, and boy, oh boy, we're onto something. We really, really are. So that it was listening to Ella and Alam and her peers in the territory mapping workshop that really made me think, yeah, this is something we can do. It's going to be special. So thank you for your time, everyone, this morning.
And thank you for your contribution there, Graham. That's wonderful to hear, and I wish you success in taking that out further into the wider community. We're drawing to a close. It's gone on a little longer than we'd planned. We've got about 12 minutes left. There have been a number of questions that are coming through, and thank you to everybody, and thank you to all of our speakers, and Ella and Ahmed. That was a wonderful way to conclude that section on what could be theoretical, but you've made very practical. We just going to cover a couple of the questions, if we may. I'm not sure that we're going to get through all of them, but Emma Griswood asked before we began, Anthony, can I address this one to you? Really interested to know how it can be helped to prepare leaders for new challenges, such as leading in ambiguous and complex situations. Somebody referred to the VUCA ideal, with the military way of describing volatile, uncertain, chaotic and ambiguous situations, and how this can be more of a collaborative and transparent tool. Anthony, do you want to pick that up?
Yes, I think just very, very briefly. I mean, obviously I've done it with a number of schools and children, and I think it is really perceptions of leadership which is the most important. I remember doing it in one school once, and one boy one pupils drew themselves as a sergeant, and the other one drew themselves as an officer. I just said, so why do you think you're not an officer? Well, I don't know. Well, I said, well, if he can be one, you can be one. And I think this is what it shows. It gives people hope. And I hope Ella and the others can say, they can start to see the dynamism within their own lives of where they can move to. And I think once you realize leadership has got to be dynamic, it's got to be moving from A to B and giving people hope and belief why they should be doing it. And that's how I think the mapping starts a conversation. It starts people talking about what is possible and ultimately where they can ask people for help. So I think that's a part of it as well.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And I think, you know, certainly I know from my experience in the teaching world, working with students, I would love to have had it as a tool. We haven't got time to develop that, but just thank you. Great clarity there. Can I? The next question, can I address to John and Graham, because you've worked this with learners in school. The question is, you'd be interested to know how this has been used or could be used for students who've previously not demonstrated an interest in leadership roles and how it's turned them around. Now, I don't know whether that's true of Ella and Ahmed, but John and Graham, maybe your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'll start there. I think first of all, the values behind all of this are universal. And I mentioned, Chris, that we have a leadership philosophy at NASTBI, and that is that leadership is for everybody. And we encourage everybody to take on some kind of leadership, whether that's leadership of themselves or leadership of others. But all too often the term leadership is just bandied around, and it's a little bit vague to an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old. What does that actually mean? So if we can build a curriculum that embedded around these values, and we also talked about our residential program where the students go out to places like Tanzania and Sri Lanka and do outreach work. If we can also incorporate the values of the trust wheel into the work that they do there, then all of a sudden they start to see the big picture here, and leadership isn't that vague term that doesn't have any resonance with them. John, your thoughts?
Can you hear me all?
Yes, thank you.
We're interested in developing things with the IB organisation. I know we've got Remy Lemont here. I'd be very interested to hear what he has to say as well. The learner profile is very important in the International Baccalaureate organisation. And I really like how the trust wheel gives us a vision of thinking about the relationship between things, attributes we call them, or values we've heard them talked about here today. I think that's a really powerful tool for students to use to think how they can engage with and work with other people.
John, I know you commented previously about parents ago. Matt Buttery has asked about whether there's a kind of a dimension of involving parents as well in this leadership development.
I think Anthony and Graham can talk about that, because I think parents were involved with their day.
That's
Graham,
right.
do you want to?
Wish to put him on the spot, but we've actually got Ella's dad with us, Nicholas, who joined one of the sessions. So I don't know if Nicholas is still with us. But yeah, we're very, very keen that this is something that that is extended to our whole community, because again, I pick up on what you said, Chris, about being age agnostic, and that's exactly right. And it could be, if we get it right, it could offer some real community cohesion, we feel, with it across our entire community, whether that's students, parents, staff. But we're very much in the infancy with that one. So I don't know if Nicholas wants to jump in and tell us his thoughts as a parent.
I think
Nicholas,
he's had to go into another meeting, I think.
Right,
For me, what has been really, really exciting is, especially with John's group, is the teachers have been just as enthusiastic as the students. And I think listening to the teachers talk about their world and their lack of clarity in many things, I think created a lovely sort of bond with the students. Would you agree, Eleanor?
Definitely. I think it was just so beneficial because we don't normally share our journeys with students, but this has created an opportunity for us. And as I said, it was very enriching. Staff were very open and forthcoming, and students as well. So it was lovely to share.
Great.
Thank you. There's a number of questions that are focused on the challenges and changes brought through by COVID-19 and the lockdowns and so on. Would anybody in the panel like to comment on, you know, the new normal that we're facing and how this might give clarity of thought and moving things forward? Giles or Roddy?
I'm happy to jump in there. Well, I mean, one of the things that, I mean, I've sat in on a number of these territory mapping sessions now, and what I've found extraordinary is how well they translate to Zoom like this. You know, the success we had with the NES students on that big session that we ran a month or so ago was, it was seamless really in how quickly they grasped the concept. I mean, obviously we're dealing with enormously bright children here. We can see that, but the whole process worked amazingly well online, and this feedback session. I mean, we broke them out into small groups and in breakout rooms. But I think in terms of the new normal, in terms of the technology we're going to be using much more, even when the risks of meeting up with people lower, is it's obvious that this works doing that. But also the other new normal is the complexity of modern day existence and the requirements that we have to get people to cope with that complexity. And that, again, is something that territory mapping as a strategy visualization tool really cuts through very quickly. So I think that it offers all sorts of excellent opportunities for us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roddy. Thank you. We're coming very close to the end of time. And Christos, you came in from, you're in South Africa. Have you got any words of wisdom, or could you give a final statement? Are you there? There you are.
From South Africa, it was very interesting, your program. Thanks to Anthony Willoughby. But I think leadership is quite important. If we look into Mandela, what he have done over the years, how we grow up also in the rural areas, we grow up in a royal kraal, to become a leader, even end up in prison. When he walked out, he started with leadership. And he believed in the youth. He believed the youth is the future of the world. And he believed in education. Education was very, very important for him at that stage. So that I can say, Mandela, from that side, leadership was very important. And where I also grew up on a farm, I grew up also only with African children. When my father said to me, well, we must respect each other because we're all human beings, I grew up with humanity also. That's how me and Mandela become a friendship. It was born on Robben Island. And you people can read it also in my book. It's called Mandela, My Prisoner, My Friend.
Thank you. Thank you. And apologies for cutting you short there, Christos, but thank you for joining us this morning, and that's great for you to have some words to say. Can I just, in our concluding remarks, just draw this to some kind of conclusion? So this is a partnership between ourselves, Smart Curriculum Academy, and the Nomadic School of Business with Anthony and ourselves. We're very grateful for the number of you that have stayed with us this morning, and it's been a longer session than we normally would run. But thank you for being with us, and the contributors have made very valuable contributions to this conversation. Really, the question really is what comes next? excuse me, my presentation. So what next? Really, those of you involved in education or in the business world, there are three kind of things that we could be doing. One, engage in an experience that you might want to run with a group of students or a group of learners or within your organization. It might be, as Anthony has just described, and others have been participating in, Graham and John, and what's gone on in those school situations, a development program over time, which really has been growing. It's what might have started off as an idea has grown into a little bit more, or there may be something that you see an opportunity, the more bespoke idea of something to develop to. So what would say the suggestion we're making to you is book a call with us. If you go to the CJ Learning website and contact, you can book a call with myself, and then we can arrange a call with Anthony to follow this conversation through, what you would like to do. Otherwise, email us at info@cjlearning.com. You can see the Twitter handles and so on, what's there. In terms of between Anthony and myself, if you want to engage with us to take this conversation a little further, we thank you so much for being with us this morning. Anthony, do you want to finish on anything to say at the end?
Yes, I would really just like to reiterate what you've said. This is the beginning of a wonderfully exciting journey, I believe. And I think with COVID, as I said earlier, structure, security, stability, entitlement are all words of the past. And I think the future is self-reliance, self-confidence, belief, and inspiration. And I think it is inside everybody to have it unlocked. And working with the distinguished group of people here and enthusiasts, I think we can start to come up with something that hasn't been done before, and we can make a significant difference. And that would be a great privilege and an honor to be a part of your time today and taking it forward. But thank you all very, very much for your contribution.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if you want to contact us, please, the details are there. We're going to conclude the webinar now, but please do get in touch. Do stay in touch with us, and I'm sure we'll see you all again too. And I reiterate to Anthony's word, thank you to all the speakers in the way that you've contributed. A truly international experience. So thank you to everyone. Thank you.